It was supposed to be an ordinary ferry trip across Lake Victoria, but on May 21st, 1996, the MV Bukoba sank just a few kilometers from Mwanza port in Tanzania. By the time the rescue was over, more than 800 people were dead. It remains one of Africa's deadliest maritime disasters. This is the story of how a routine crossing turned into unthinkable tragedy, and how a handful of survivors endured the chaos. The MV Bukoba was an aging ferry built in 1979 in West Germany. By the 1990s, it had become a lifeline on Lake Victoria, carrying thousands every week between ports like Bukoba, Mwanza, and Kisumu. But after nearly 2 decades of service, it was worn down, poorly maintained, and often overcrowded. On that Tuesday morning, the Bukoba was packed far beyond its safe capacity. Officially, it could hold around 430 passengers. On this voyage, more than 1,000 were believed to be on board. Families, traders, students, even vehicles and cargo stacked high on deck. For many, this ferry was their only link between remote towns and Tanzania's larger cities. Among them was Zakaria Rudakurembelwa, a 65-year-old businessman from Bukabuye. He'd made this trip many times. This one felt no different. The waters were calm, the lake stretched out endless and still. Nobody suspected disaster, but by 6 a.m., something was clearly wrong. Survivors later recalled a sudden, sickening lurch. The overloaded ferry tilted hard to one side. Passengers panicked, rushing across the decks, throwing the balance further off. Crew members shouted for calm, but the voices were drowned out by screams. Zachariah scrambled for a life jacket, heart pounding. Before he could process what was happening, a thunderous crack tore through the hull. The ferry rolled violently, and then it capsized. Within seconds, hundreds of passengers were flung into the dark waters. Vehicles and cargo broke free, crushing those trapped below deck. Families were torn apart in the chaos. Some didn't even make it out of their cabins before the lake swallowed them whole. Zachariah was thrown overboard, knocked unconscious as he hit the water. When he came to, he was surrounded by horror. Lifeless bodies drifted beside him. Survivors screamed for help, clinging to splintered wood and twisted metal. Thick oil spread across the surface, choking the water. The ferry sank so fast that few had time to react. Out of more than 1,000 aboard, only 114 would survive. The rest disappeared beneath Lake Victoria. Quick break. We make videos about real stories that sound made up. From survival to strange true events, if it actually happened and it's unbelievable, we cover it. So, if you're into that, hit subscribe. It helps more than you know. Alright, let's get back to the video. Those still alive faced new dangers. The water was cold, sapping strength. Survivors clutched at anything that floated. Some tried to swim toward shore, but exhaustion set in quickly, and beneath the surface lurked more threats. Lake Victoria was home to crocodiles and hippos. For those already bleeding or struggling, it was a nightmare layered on top of disaster. Hours dragged by. A handful of rescue boats arrived, but the scene was overwhelming. The ferry had gone down just 30 kilometers from Mwanza, one of the busiest ports on the lake, yet help was painfully slow. Tanzania's Navy and local fishermen tried desperately to pull people from the water, but the sheer number of victims made it impossible to save everyone. By the end of the first day, hundreds of bodies had been recovered. Others would be pulled from the water for days afterward. Entire families were lost at once. In some cases, victims were buried in mass graves with no chance for loved ones to say goodbye. Survivors like Zachariah were left scarred by what they'd seen. He later said, "Every time I close my eyes, I see the faces of those who didn't make it. It's a pain that never leaves." The disaster shook Tanzania to its core. The government declared days of mourning. Investigations revealed what many already knew. The Bukoba had been dangerously overloaded and poorly maintained. Basic safety rules were ignored. There weren't enough life jackets. Emergency training for the crew was minimal. Reforms were promised. Passenger limits were strictly enforced on ferries. New safety inspections were introduced, and new vessels were built, including the MV Mwanza Hapakazi II, a modern ferry launched 2 decades later with stronger safety features, meant to restore trust in Lake Victoria's transport system. But for many, it was too little, too late. The scars of 1996 run deep, In Bukoba, Mwanza, and countless lakeside communities, May 21st is remembered as a day of national tragedy. More than 800 lives were lost. The sinking of the MV Bukoba was more than just a ferry accident. It was a brutal reminder of the cost of negligence and a testament to the will to survive against impossible odds. Real story that sounds made up. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. If you want more stories like this, we've got another one waiting for you right here.